I am Nancy Tuamakoboa with the Los Angeles Housing Department, and I'm joined by another LHD staff person who will introduce himself.
Hi everyone, Joel Montano with the Los Angeles Housing Department. Happy to be here and listen to the engaging conversation that you all will have on this topic. Thank you. I'll pass it back to Nancy.
Thanks, Joe. We also have staff representing the Housing Authority of the City of Los Angeles. Please go ahead and introduce yourselves.
Hi, I'm Ann Lynch from the Housing Authority of City of Los Angeles. I think Han Ta is there and Angela. Go ahead, Han.
Hi, my name is Han and I'm joining from HACLA.
Hi, my name is Angelina Zargarian. I'm an ombudsperson with Housing Authority City of Los Angeles.
Great, thank you. And I will now turn it over to Mosaic Community Planning, who is partnering with LHD and HACLA in developing the city's 5-year assessment of fair housing plan. They will be facilitating our discussion today.
Hi, I'm Melissa Mayu with Mosaic Community Planning and happy to be here. I'll be doing a short presentation and then leading a discussion today.
Hi, Jessica Fish, also with Mosaic.
I think too, we have a pretty small group. So if others could maybe take the time to unmute yourself and introduce yourself, that would be great.
Damon Johnson. I am the president of the Empowerment Congress Central Neighborhood Council for the City of Los Angeles.
Hi everyone, I'm Wajiha Ibrahim. I'm a city planner with the Department of City Planning.
Hi everyone, my name is Delia Arriaga. I'm also with the Department of City Planning. I'm a city planner there. Thank you.
Hi, Greg Spiegel with the Policy Unit of LAHD.
I'll read from the chat that we also have Sandra Almedo, who is with the Southeast Area representative for Mayor Brass's Office of Public Engagement. Anyone else that would like to introduce themselves? And Daniel Inez with horticulture, who is the horticulture and transportation specialist with ILCSC. Well, thank you all very much for joining us today. So most of this meeting will be a discussion with you all about issues related to fair housing, particularly fair housing and neighborhoods, transportation, and environmental health are the topics that we're focusing on today. Before we do that, I'll start with a brief overview of the project that we're working on. I know some of you may be familiar with it, some of you less so, but we'll start with the overview so everyone is on the same page. So this project, an assessment of fair housing, or AFH, will analyze the fair housing landscape in the city of Los Angeles, essentially looking at whether all residents are able to access housing that is suitable for them, free from unlawful discrimination. We'll also look at how well people are able to access different types of community resources depending on where they live. So the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, or HUD, requires any city or county that receives HUD grants for community development or affordable housing to complete these types of studies every 5 years, which includes the city of LA. And additionally, as of 2018, the state of California also requires public agencies to do a similar study. So this may be something you've heard about previously. So generally, when we talk about fair housing, we're talking about everyone's right to participate in the housing market, to own, sell, purchase their home without fear of unlawful discrimination. So that includes things like renting or buying a house, being able to obtain insurance, having access to housing loans, fair property appraisals, all the different things that you'd go through in the process of accessing a place to live. Under the Federal Fair Housing Act, everyone is protected from housing discrimination based on race or ethnicity, color, religion, national origin, sex, family status, and disability. Additionally, as you can see on that slide, the state of California has a series of laws that expand fair housing protection to include several more protected classes, which you see listed there. So marital status, age, ancestry, immigration status, language, sexual orientation, gender identity and expression, genetic information, source of income, veteran or military status, occupation, or other arbitrary factors. So you can see you have a pretty expanded fair housing protection being in the state of California. In 2015, HUD adopted a new rule called Affirmatively Furthering Fair Housing, or AFFH. And that really called on cities to take a more critical look at the role of housing in their communities. So rather than just looking at housing discrimination, this was really looking at how where people live might impact their ability to access resources. Looking at things like segregation and inclusivity, affordability, things like that. So one of the things the AFFH rule requires cities to look at is access to community resources and opportunities. So things like good schools, good jobs, transit, grocery stores, healthcare facilities, and a clean environment. Cities need to consider whether everyone has access to neighborhoods with these types of opportunities, regardless of their race, ethnicity, or other protected class. So you really see here HUD taking a more expansive approach to fair housing. Under the Trump administration, HUD pared this rule back a bit, essentially suspending the requirement to conduct a fair housing study. So what had been put in place under Obama got pared back a good bit several years ago. But then early in the Biden administration, the rule was reinstated. So that again required cities and counties that get HUD grants to keep an up-to-date fair housing study complete. And then last month, HUD released a new proposed rule that would further define what those studies should look like and provide additional support for affirmatively furthering fair housing. That's currently in a draft phase, so HUD is taking public comments on that. But you can see there's been an evolving approach to fair housing nationally, and that landscape has been changing significantly over the last several years. Let's see, the study that we're working on will include a variety of components. So we'll be looking at demographics and patterns related to residential segregation, integration, and income. We'll be identifying areas of the city with high levels of racial segregation, including areas where there's considerable segregation related to poverty and related to affluence. So kind of looking at how that interplays with income. And we'll also look at opportunities to several of the things I mentioned earlier, so things like schools, jobs, transit, a clean environment. And a lot of those are things we specifically want to talk about today. We'll consider housing costs and whether affordable housing need varies by protected class. We'll also look at public housing, tax credit developments, other types of affordable housing. So what is available and where is that within the city? And then finally, what will come out of all this analysis and all the engagement that we're doing will be a summary of key fair housing issues and then goals and strategies to address them over the next 5 years. So community input is a really important part of this. I think some of you participated in some of the community meetings we had late last year, and now we're doing a series of stakeholder meetings this month to continue to gather input for this, and that'll be an ongoing process throughout the study. So in addition to meeting state and federal requirements, the AFH will really be important for local leaders as they make decisions about housing policies and resources. It will be built on community input and is one way residents can voice their opinions to city leadership and HACLA leadership as well. This study will advance past fair housing efforts, including things like the city's recently completed housing element and its previous assessment of fair housing from 2018. And ultimately, what will come out of the plan is really an action-oriented strategy. It can impact how the city will make decisions about how to spend grant funds it will receive for housing and community development and homelessness. But the strategies will also shape other projects and programs that the city and HACLA will undertake. Finally, the plan will be adopted by City Council and HACLA leadership. It will represent a commitment by both of those agencies to implement activities that expand fair housing and stop future housing discrimination for residents. To give you an example of some of the things that have come out of past fair housing studies, things like the city's law protecting discrimination based on source of income, or the city's tenant anti-harassment ordinance, eviction prevention efforts like Stay Housed LA, and other similar policies have been further initiated and furthered by past fair housing studies the city has done. Here we just have a quick outline of our schedule for the assessment of fair housing. And you can see there that there's quite a few opportunities for engagement. We held community meetings at the end of last year and are doing stakeholder meetings now. Another group that's working on the AFH is conducting a series of focus groups with residents. So really trying to get input from as large a group as possible. And you can see there we'll have a few months to draft the AFH and kind of pull all the analyses and engagement together. And then in the summer, in July, we hope that we will hear from you again. We'll have a meeting to discuss kind of what we found and what some preliminary strategies are. We hope you'll join us then to provide some inputs so that we can better refine those and make them as strong as possible for the city. Then later in the summer, we anticipate having a complete draft of the AFH for the public to review. Then we'll make any final revisions to prepare for a fall approval by City Council and HACLA. At this point, I'd like to pause and take any questions. You see there I have some kind of instructions for using Zoom, raising your hands. We're a pretty small group though, so if you have questions and would like to unmute and share them, please feel free. And for anyone joining by phone, you can use *6 to mute or unmute and *9 to raise your hand. So if there's any questions kind of about the plan that we're doing, happy to take them now. Yeah, Damon?
Hi. So one of the things I wanted to ask moreover is the targeted outreach of the community meeting, stakeholder meetings, and just to say, is the project utilizing neighborhood councils to get the information out about the community meetings and assessment?
So the stakeholder meetings now, our invitations were sent to a group of stakeholders kind of with particular expertise on a variety of topics, so 10 or 12 topic areas or so. And those were stakeholders identified by the city or HACLA or folks who asked to be involved in the process. I think
That's correct. I can address that as well. Since this is these sessions are specific to those who are providing services in the field, we had a target list of groups and individuals that notices were sent out to.
And that's for the community meetings as well. I was speaking more of I know I heard that there were several community meetings that happened. I'm not necessarily speaking of the stakeholder meeting, but the particular community meetings that was mentioned earlier.
Oh, okay. So we held community meetings at the end of last year in December. And our community meetings, we held, I believe, a total of 7. And we focused on different areas within the city. So those larger community meetings that went out to the public, we did utilize the help of the Department on Neighborhood Empowerment to get the word out and to be able to share the invitation notices that we have for those sessions.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for your question.
And we'll talk about it a little bit later in the meeting, but we have a survey that's open to the entire community as well. So I think that kind of went out through that group as well. Through a similar process to what Nancy described. Any other questions? All right. Oh, let's see. Maybe one in the chat. Jumping back to introductions, Daniel's from the Independent Living Center of Southern California. Sorry, I didn't see that earlier. Okay, well, I will stop my screen share now so that we are kind of all able to see one another and hopefully have some discussion about the questions that were on the agenda that we shared. So we're happy to have you share vocally, to unmute yourself and participate in the discussion. There are a couple other options, so you can share things in the chat. If you, I think someone mentioned they are not able to unmute, so if it's easier to share in the chat, please do that. We also have an online form where you will see all the discussion questions. So if you click the link that Jessica just put in the chat, that's surveymonkey.com/r/LA-neighborhoods-transit-environment. That will take you to a form with all of the discussion questions. And if there's things you'd like to provide in writing, please do that there. If you think of things after this meeting that you'd like to share, that's a great way to do it. Please, so however is easiest for you. We'd like to have a discussion, but if it's easier to provide things in writing, we are happy to have that input as well. But maybe the first thing I'll start with. So in that presentation, I talked a good bit about kind of this idea that one of the things this fair housing study will be looking at is access to different community resources. So how well are people able to access different assets and programs, infrastructure, things like that. So thinking about neighborhoods in the city of LA, what areas generally have higher or lower? Maybe I'll start with public transit. What places tend to have higher or lower levels of access to transit? Yeah, Delia.
Hi, so I'm a city planner with the Department of City Planning. I'm working on the Northeast Valley, and public transit is coming, sure, to the valley, but it's, a few years away. 2028 is the earliest we'll get the East San Fernando Valley light rail transit. As a whole, the valley has a lot of opportunity for transit, but doesn't actually have it. So a lot of folks up here, especially those who are poor and don't have access to cars, are actually struggling with that.
Okay, thanks. And Sandra, I see your hand up as well.
Yeah, I was actually thinking more so about access to safe public transit. While I represent the Southeast, right, that's under the 10 freeway down to about the 105 between Central and Vermont. This is a community that does largely use their public transportation, buses, train systems. However, when we're thinking of, like, for example, a bus stop, there's lack of lighting, there's no shelter for them to stand, there's nowhere for them to sit. So I think that also deters people's feelings of safety in their community when they are on public transit.
Yeah, sure. I think those are great points. So in one case, just kind of the infrastructure not existing there yet, and then in another, it's not being necessarily being safe for folks to use. Great. So you can see there in the chat that Jessica put kind of a list of different types of community resources. So sidewalks, parks, open space, bike paths, healthcare facilities, grocery stores. Any thoughts on kind of any of those maybe that you have thoughts about of areas in the city that have better access to those than others? Yeah, Sandra.
I don't mean to monopolize, so please.
No, please.
Y'all. But from what I've seen as an area representative, I am obviously dedicated to South LA, but I have had the opportunity to visit on the West Side, even in the Valley. And when we talk about, is this specifically public transit that we're talking about now, or are we on safe and accessible?
Any of those topics that you'd want to touch on is fine.
Yeah. Okay, so for example, our sidewalks in this area are often have tree roots that have uprooted the sidewalks, or gaps in our cement, while on the west side, that is very rarely an occurrence. Of course, it happens everywhere, but it's handled pretty efficiently. I would say as well, there's more walkable cities or walkable neighborhoods on these other areas than in South LA, where in South LA you have long stretches of land with little to no covering from the sun or the elements, and no that sense of, like, again, we're coming back to the safety of walking in the area.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Let's see. I think Damon's hand was up first, so I'll go there.
Yeah, and I think that also, our alleys, our alleyways in Los Angeles, and in South Los Angeles, and I think pretty much throughout Los Angeles, but in South LA, we do have a huge problem with our alleys being accessible, in either they're overgrown vegetation, either there's no runoff, and when it rains, it's flooding. You can't use the alley to cut through like you would do, on any other time. If you're a resident living, whether it's a public housing or your own home, living off that alley, you can't barely safely access, your garage, or that's often in the alleyway to get to your garage.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think we heard a bit about alley accessibility and safety in our community meetings as well. So yeah, thanks for bringing that up. Delia? Oh, sorry, Nancy, were you going to say?
Oh, no, I was just going to say, I believe Damon participated in our community meeting in the past and brought that up. I remember that that comment before, so yeah.
Yeah, Delia.
Hi, so Delia, City Planning. Sandra, I want to echo what you said as far as the safety concerns. I think when we look at the infrastructure for Metro or even our sidewalks or our alleys, like Damon mentioned, they may exist, but honestly, some of them are completely unusable. And I know there was an article recently about our bus shelters not actually either existing, and when they do exist, they don't actually serve everyone. There's some issues with the conflict between that and our unhoused neighbors. We do have an issue of not just having non-existent infrastructure, but when it does exist, it's not usable. And the other part I want to bring up, and I'm again here representing a little bit of the Pacoima, Arleta, and Panorama City areas, because that's what I'm working on right now. There's issues with parks not being used, not being able to be used, right? So I know Tobias Park in Panorama City is there, but community members have told me, and people who know the area have already told me, that one has become unusable for most people in the community. Some people need it, obviously, for housing and other things where we are failing as a city. But as a whole, even when something on the map shows there's a park there, it's not usable for everyone, and there's safety concerns and other maintenance concerns as well. And I think that will come up a lot as well. We don't maintain our infrastructure. And so even if it is relatively safe, if it's in poor condition, it's not, it's not meeting the needs of our residents.
Okay. Sure. So maybe a couple things you're talking about. There's some parks where maybe unhoused neighbors are staying, so they maybe neighbors living around there are less likely to use them. And then some issues just with maintenance not being done, sounds like. Yeah, Wahia?
Yep, it's Wajiha. Hi, everyone. That's okay. Wajiha Ibrahim from City Planning. I'm really happy Delia brought up parks and green spaces. What I was going to share is just the need for shade and tree canopies. And I think, we're all kind of touching on these aspects of, in some areas, these resources do exist, but access is an issue. And where there may be bus stations or transit stops, there isn't an urban design component that's considerate of the fact that the climate that Southern California experiences for so much of the year requires shade, and that is another contributor to the lack of use I guess, of some of the resources that do exist, whether they're sidewalks, whether they're bus stops, whether there's some of these parks and pocket parks that do exist. The absence of shade and shade canopies, I think, is I think one thing that East Coast planners and designers really shame LA for, and it's something that ever since I've moved here several years ago, is something that I experienced the lack of as well. And then secondly, I wanted to share a resource that some of you may already be familiar with, and I'm just going to add this into the chat. With city planning, I'm on the citywide policy and housing team. And as we are looking at our rezoning, arena rezoning efforts, and looking at what kind of resources exist in the city and where we see a disproportionate resources available, we've been looking at this opportunity map that was created by SCAG, and it's interesting to kind of compare our lived experience. I mean, what we see in the neighborhoods we live in, but what we drive through versus kind of what the data is showing. And sometimes it reiterates what we see and experience and know to be true. And other times there's kind of an alarming reality check of what the situation's like. So I just wanted to share that for everybody.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's a bit of what we're trying to do here as well too, is look at some data about resources, but also have conversations like this, so that we can make sure the plan is reflecting what people actually experience on the ground. Oh, thank you. let's see, Damon?
Yes, I'm back. Um, I was speaking to in regards to, as certain areas like South LA, as we have seen an increase in, folks owning dogs and dog walking, but we don't have the dog parks to accommodate or areas for people to bring their animals. For instance, if they put up let's say a low-income apartment building or some sort of development, and you're renting to people that are going to have animals, why not have some sort of green space on that development for people to take their animals to, as opposed to walk down the street. And then even speaking on that, we go to the west side, some corners have dog bags, poop bags to pick up your dog's poop when you're walking down the block. But in South LA, where we have a lot of folks walking dogs, we don't have that access as well.
Okay, thanks. Well, the second question that I had, I think we've started talking a little bit about it, so I'll ask it kind of directly. Are there differences in levels of maintenance or quality among different resources across the city? And I think we've had some comments about that. But also, what types of approaches should the city and or HACLA take to expand resident access to transit or healthy neighborhoods or environmental health, those types of things? Let's see, Sandra, I think I saw your hand first.
Yes, thank you. So in terms of levels of maintenance or quality, absolutely there are. And again, I'm speaking from the South LA lens. And in terms of what approaches the city or HACLA could do, I would consider proactive approaches, not waiting for the community to come to you all to let you know, this is not working for me, or this particular neighborhood has this issue. But if you all had a dedicated team that went once a week or however often to survey these neighborhoods and really get to know the community on a firsthand basis, so that we can build the trust, so that someday the proactive team won't need to be so proactive. But in South LA especially, there's a sense of disconnect, and I think the city can take a big role in reconnecting our communities to their services, which are there and are for them, but they don't necessarily know about it.
Okay, thank you. When you say a disconnect, are you thinking like a disconnect in terms of communication with the city, or like physical disconnect, like a lack of similar resources, or maybe a bit of both? How would you characterize that?
That's a really great question. I do think it's a bit of both. Both disconnect in terms of communication, right? We're thinking language access gap, we're thinking digital divide. And then on top of that, while the resources are here and they're present, I'm not sure that people feel that they are for them. And that's a more complicated question that I don't necessarily have the answer to. But for example, like if the council members district office is there, people use them, but a majority of folks do not know what that office is for or what you can get done there. So that type of disconnect.
Okay, so maybe the idea of like using the city resource might not be part of kind of culture or what's in people's minds there. Thanks. Let's see, Damon?
Yeah, and just to say, kind of speak to the survey thing, I've been part of so many surveys in the city, right? and it just, as a neighborhood council board member, president, going out and getting other people to take surveys, getting involved, it's like, I think that our community is done, fed up with surveys. They want to see the outcomes of the survey, the results, and what are they doing? What is the city doing about everything we've surveyed for the last 10 years, and continue. And when we speak about the transportation issues, I think that we've done quite a few studies and surveys throughout the whole city. I think Streets LA, DOT, Metro, between all of the walk audits I've been participating in, and those things, the data is kind of there. And I think sometimes we need to draw those other entities in when it comes to the data from those folks who have already done the data. There's so much projects that have happened where there's been overlaps in surveys and you're getting the information 2 and 3 times from different projects, but no one is going to the agency or the person who was doing the previous project to say, hey, can we see your transportation data? You know.
Sure.
Yeah, so that I think that's just a good way. You know, I just made that suggestion. You know, we're doing the the Florence Bus Priority Lane project, and made that suggestion when they were talking about data. Well, why didn't we get Western Arways data? Why didn't we get Rail to Rivers data? All these that coincide and pass each other. We have, you know, and you'll see the data is the same: street lighting, potholes. You know, so you'll start to see a consistency in the data. You know, because I think again, just the communities are tired of being surveyed and they want to see what the results of these surveys are.
Yeah, I think that's understandable and definitely something we can appreciate.
I'll just, I thank you for that. Damon, I think that's a good point, just in terms of, you know, what's being done at the city in terms of really being able to report back in terms of outcomes, and then also, you know, speaking as far as if the study, these various studies revealed certain data and certain results, what do we do at this point? How do we move forward? And what does it all mean? So coming back and really being able to speak to that with the public is important before moving on and engaging in other studies. And even determining, was that study even effective, right? And what did we get out what we wanted, what we intended from that study? Does that study need to be you know, continued or have another phase to it? I think is important because, of course, there's a number of resources that go into doing these studies that do even involve the public, right? In terms of the sessions, public sessions that take place, the surveys that are involved in those studies, the comments period of these studies and what have you. So being able to really speak to, did we get out what we wanted to, and then reporting back is very important. And it holds us accountable. So I think that's a good point.
Yeah, Joel.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring up, you know, kind of a question for those, you know, participants here who have been kind of sharing their experience, you know, kind of with the inequities and issues of, you know, lack of maintenance or overgrown vegetation, because, you know, the city of Los Angeles does have the 311 service hotline for non-emergency services. So one question I wanted to kind of throw out to the group here is, one, if you know that is available, and 2, have you used it? And if so, what has been your experience, you know, using 311 service requests? And I see Damon already at the hand up, so look forward to hearing this.
Thank you. You know, as most folks know and some don't know, one of the jobs of the neighborhood councils in the city charter is to monitor the delivery of city services of every city department within our areas. And one of the things that has constantly happened, 311 is a great system, right? It's a great way to get the community to easily put in work orders, you know, for traffic lights, potholes, bulky item pickup. However, what we're seeing is a consistency of orders being closed before the work is done, and some of the work actually not getting done. And so that has been something that has brought an issue. As a neighborhood council, we put in just last year 326 311 requests, of which 122 or 23 were labeled as complete and closed, but the work was not done. And so that's the only negative part of the experience through monitoring these services that we've discovered in our area. And then I did have a chance to kind of see the council office, Councilwoman Eunice Hernandez. She put a motion on the floor actually in regards to that, and they're now looking into those work orders and how 311 is doing, and because of so much of communities' complaints in regards to putting in these requests and the requests not being fulfilled and been marked as completed and closed.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else feedback about the 311 system? Okay. Well, then one of the other questions that we had was about challenges faced by folks, people with disabilities, whether physical, mental, intellectual, developmental, challenges that they may have in accessing any types of these community resources that we've been talking about. And maybe particularly public transit and what type of mobility issues they might have relying on public transit. Anyone with thoughts there? Yeah, Damon.
I think that, again, some of the repetitiveness, like, again, the bus benches, shade spots, some particular bus, bus benches don't have, bus stops to sit at are shade spots. And I think when we go back to surveys, I think those are the type of short surveys that, should be periodically done, like, to assess an area's need for a bus bench. Is this mostly senior use? Is this mostly disabled folks? What's the percentage of folks in this area? And then I've seen where something happens, let's say to the sidewalk, and there's construction that takes place on the sidewalk where the bus stop is, the bus bench is removed, but it's never replaced after the work has been done. So we see that in various places. So, and there's no, basically no one said, oh, wait a minute, this is a high senior area, which 48th and Western in the city of Los Angeles is one of those locations that I'm kind of speaking of. And I kind of reached out to Metro myself and got a bus bench put back there. But those are the kind of things that we have noticed, if someone's doing some sort of work and they remove the bus stop and bench and they didn't put it back,
Yeah, that's a really good point. So kind of instances where if there's construction or things like that, making sure that it's at least back to the same standard as it was before in terms of accessibility and hopefully improved.
Yeah, but what I discovered was that, Metro's like, oh, well, the contractor who was contracted to do the work didn't tell us that, the bus bench wasn't put back, or they needed Metro to put it, or whatever the situation was,
Okay, sure, like some miscommunication there on their side. Let's see, we had a comment in the chat from Sandra that sidewalk repairs are a need, especially for folks with mobility issues. And then let's see, I think, Wajiha, I saw your hand up next, I think.
Yeah, actually, Sandra got my comment. I didn't see that in the chat. But one other thing I would reiterate, and I think this has been shared quite a few times, is specifically for the Metro, whenever I'm taking the train, I don't ever see any staff on site. So if there is someone that, particularly that has any kind of challenge, let's say someone needs an issue or has an issue and needs support with their tap card, and there's no staff on site to assist with that. And there's no staff on site to create the sense of safety or security either, which I think applies across the board, whether someone has any disabilities or not.
Sure, yeah, okay. So kind of just to give a sense of safety, but also if you need assistance with something, no one there to ask.
And just to add to the Wajia's point, I guess that's a matter of the city working more with Metro, right, with the county in regards to that, because there would need to be that cross collaboration that's taking place in terms of being able to really ensure accessibility for persons with disabilities, and then, you know, also being able to ensure that riders have what they need, and using these, you know, public resources. So I think that's something in which, you know, how do we bridge that gap with them? Given the fact that, you know, these are metro transportation resources. However, you know, it impacts those who are riding, who are passengers throughout the city and regionally, right? We want to ensure that folks who are going from one point to the next are safe, and they are able to get the assistance that's needed. So I think being able to really have that, you know, that communication with them, and perhaps develop some sort of, you know, plan in place, I think is important. Again, this is something that it's Metro, you know, Metro is the one that is providing the services. However, it is something that it is in the city's best interest that folks remain safe and be able to get from one point to another, with whether they have a disability or not.
Yeah, thanks, Nancy. Delia, I think I saw your hand up next.
Oh, thank you. So I think Damon kind of triggered something about something I actually just observed. I was in my area on Van Nuys and Plummer, and there's a wonderful project happening there, the Talisa Apartments. You know, I know people are excited about it. They look great so far. But going back to mobility issues, when that construction, and I believe the construction project is still going, and again, it's in Van Nuys and Plummer. When the construction project was happening, and it probably still is, the sidewalk is completely closed with no alternative on that side. That's something we can control when it comes to construction sites. I think I've seen that. I mean, I've seen it in more affluent areas. I know I just was at the LACMA, and there's all kinds of things to make sure that mobility is not hindered. But in this case, I mean, I know for a fact you have to go into the street or cross all the way across, go all the way across, and the 167 bus stop is like right across. So what we're doing then is hindering anybody who lives across from here or around this from getting to that 167 bus stop. They'd have to go to another one or what have you. I think that's something we can control, so that we don't make things worse while we're providing, you know, we're trying to provide housing, right? We don't want to make things worse in the interim, and these projects go on for a while. So whoever was using the 167 that has mobility issues has already been impacted. And I think going forward, these construction projects have to be more cognizant and aware of that.
Yeah, sure. That's a great point. And maybe kind of similar to Damon's point regarding bus benches that after construction don't get put back. So kind of what is happening when construction happens and while that's happening and afterwards, making sure that things remain in good condition and accessible. Let's see, Damon, did you have something to add?
Yeah, you know, as far as the construction and things are happening to that nature, we had the same situation in our area where construction had like completely halted and for quite some time, and no one could use the sidewalk, which the bus was altered and routed, and so it created a lot of problems. But I think the issue is, what is the obligation of the contractor? And to have these things done, and completed. What's their time frame when we're on public right of way and public land, and a contractor starts a project and just completely obstructs the public's right of way for months and months? Where is the obligation there? Under their contract, do they get fined more for holding these projects? Because the public safety and right of way is at risk here, and so that becomes a problem. And then I had a comment about the earlier, someone mentioned, and I'm trying to, I got a brain fart, so I may have to raise my hand and come back. So
Sure, no problem. And Delia, that may have been a little bit of what you were referring to when you're saying that's kind of within the city's control, some being
Yeah.
both the sidewalks, but also kind of relationships with those contractors and what you're requiring of them.
Yeah, I think we need to be a little bit more careful with our contractors, what we require. There could, whatever we have. I actually don't know how that works because, the planning department doesn't handle it at construction. That's, we hand it off. But it is something that I think, and maybe I'm wrong, actually, maybe the planning department can do something and I need to bring it up to folks within my department. But yeah, what happens there is like, what do we do? What are we telling them they have to do? Because I think they'll do the bare minimum, and that's understandable. I understand you're trying to get things through deadlines, timelines, lowest costs, lowest obstacles for yourself. But we as a city need to make sure that we don't do that. We don't,
set
do
the
our due diligence. We need to have a standard, I believe.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, and Damon.
yes, I remembered what I was going to say. We were speaking in regards to the safety on the metro, and we've heard that it's Metro who's basically in charge of safety. But we have to also remember that LAPD has a contract with Metro, right? And so they are under the city of Los Angeles, although the contract is with Metro, and maybe there could be talks between the city and LAPD, who's under the city, about what that also looks like when they're getting contracts from other municipalities like Metro, but a lot of those contracts are within the city. So the buses, the LAPD is operating within the city of LA on those contracts.
Sure, in terms of safety and making sure folks are able to access them safely.
Yes.
Thanks. Let's see. I think so. You're doing a very good job of kind of leading into the next question that I had. So I'll ask this one. The city's 2021 and 2029 housing element really identified first and last mile connections. So kind of the distance to a bus stop or sidewalk conditions between where someone lives and where they're able to access transit. That was identified as a key barrier that particularly people with disabilities face in accessing transit. But I think a lot of times those last mile connections impact everyone, and how well you're able to get from your home to where you're accessing transit. How have recent planning efforts sought to improve those connections? Have you seen any improvements, or that's still an issue? Sounds like from what you've shared earlier that there are still some issues, like particularly the situation you described, Delia, where folks are not able to access a particular bus stop because the sidewalk is closed. Yeah, sure, go ahead.
Yeah, so I don't want to get on my soapbox. So I think that the city is doing a lot, but in my role, we're planners, right? So we don't do the capital projects, that's LADOT, that's BOE. But what we are doing is looking at our street designations through our community plan updates, looking how we are implementing what was said in the mobility element, the designations themselves, and then looking at what sidewalk dedications can really look like in places that are lacking. All of that is very time consuming, very cost intensive, and it is long term. But I think at least I can speak to the area that I'm working on, and I'm sure actually our mobility plan folks are also working with LADOT. We're trying to make sure that those last mile, but beyond the last mile, in fact, we're talking about a corridor, in my case, all of Van Nuys. It's not just the last mile in every case, but we have, street designations we can work from to lead into what capital projects and improvements will look like. That's all very long term, though. I think in the short term, that's why I brought up the construction project. The very few assets that we do have if we can keep them, as clear and accessible as possible. And because all of that stuff that I'm talking about is so long-term, project by project. So yes.
Yeah, sure. I think that makes sense that there are, kind of longer term plans, but then also you want to make sure that there's not impediments kind of on a daily basis as construction happens or other types of things like that. Yeah, David? Damon, were you going to share anything or maybe not?
Oh, excuse me. I'm sorry. So I noticed like some of the handicap ramps are either not there in certain areas, or they're catty-cornered in such a way to where it kind of forces someone in a wheelchair or something to have to go kind of out into the traffic to get onto the sidewalk ramp, the ramp.
Okay. Sure. So some issues in terms of orientation of ramps. Let's see. What about any key advancements underway or planned or proposed that would expand residents' access to some of the resources that we've talked about, kind of particularly that first list? So sidewalks, parks, grocery stores, healthcare facilities, anything like that you see advancements that would help expand some access. So for example, we've heard about metros like transit extensions, next gen bus plan, Cool Spots LA, other things like that are happening that help to expand access.
I'm sorry, Damon Johnson here. I think there's projects, but I don't think there's like a citywide plan that's expanding that. I think that these things are happening in like regional projects, area type projects. And I think it needs to be one, excuse me, one overall master plan of how we are expanding access, and not, Western Our Way project, for instance, in our area is expanding access, and all the other projects that are happening are expanding access, but it's in a geographical area. It's in a zone or whatever way they put it. It's not a citywide thing that's going to tackle the major issue, no matter which region of the city you stay in.
Okay, so maybe some smaller initiatives that are more local versus something citywide.
Well, I think that's what we have right now, are smaller initiatives. Yeah. I think they need one larger one.
Okay, understood. Yeah, Delia?
I'm assuming you all know about Streets LA, but if you don't, they're doing their bus stop. I don't know how to call it, but they're definitely doing improvements to bus stops.
Okay.
They had a couple of options they were looking at before when I was first involved. I'm not sure where they're at with it, but they were mapping where those bus stops would go, those improved bus stops.
Okay.
And they had a contract underway. I actually don't know exactly where they are right now, but they were doing that.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, that's good. Let's see. Anyone else on that topic? Well, then I'll move to our last question, which is really pretty focused on environmental threats. So things like heat waves, droughts, in what ways are they likely to continue to impact LA? And are there neighborhoods or demographics that you see that have a higher likelihood to be impacted by some of these threats than others? Anyone with any thoughts on kind of those environmental impacts that the city might experience? Delia, I see your hand up, but I'm not sure. I think that might have been from the previous question. Yeah. Okay, sorry, go ahead, Sandra.
Yeah, so for our neighborhoods and demographics, we're gonna come back to our previous points, right? The lack of the canopies, tree canopies. I have been seeing a reinvestment in cool pavement, in particular spots in South LA, and I'm sure throughout the city as well. And that might be another way to mitigate this. But our greenery in our neighborhoods cannot be understated. And we do have cooling centers, but not enough for the amount of residents who lack air conditioning amenities, as well as our unhoused neighbors. So
Okay.
there is definitely room for improvement in terms of the cooling centers.
So it sounds like not enough. In response to that, do you feel like it would be more appropriate to have more cooling centers kind of spread throughout the city, or do they need to be bigger? The ones that exist, do they serve residents pretty well, or do you have any?
I would say the ones that would have to be made need to be strategically placed. I'm not sure that it's about having a vast amount of cooling centers, which I'm sure would be helpful, but if we strategically place them in a way that is accessible, and I'm thinking specifically to the residents in deep South LA, I'm talking past 80th, past 100th Street, where are they able to go to cooling centers? Of course, we have our Rexham Park, and we have a lot of great opportunities for these residents, but there's always room for improvement. And I think we can strategically place those in a way that is accessible to folks of all walks of life.
Okay, yeah, thanks for that additional information. Anyone else with thoughts on the cooling centers and how well they've been serving residents, or ways to improve their access to them? Well, I'll ask then, is there anything that we haven't talked about that you feel is important for us to know? Maybe something that you feel like is really important to have in this study, but I haven't asked a specific question about it yet. All right, well, I will move on a bit, but certainly if you think of things after the meeting or after today that you would still like to share, we have that SurveyMonkey link. I think Jessica can put it in the chat again. So feel free to provide additional input on these questions through that link. Also, if you have, I'm going to put up a email address in just a second. And if you have additional input that you'd like to share, definitely send it to that address as well. Let me jump back to our PowerPoint to the couple last slides. Let's see. I'll start by saying thank you so much for all your input today. We've, I think, had a great discussion and really appreciate the time that you've taken for this meeting to provide your thoughts about fair housing and about access to some of these neighborhood resources. We hope that you will continue to stay involved with the assessment of fair housing. We appreciate everyone's thoughts, everyone's ideas. Your input is truly making the study stronger and communicates to city and housing authority leaders what priorities and strategies the city should focus on over the next several years. So this is a website where everything related to the project is available. So you can see recordings from the community meetings that we had last year. And that website will continue to serve as kind of the information hub for the project. So when we have a draft, it will be available there. As other meetings occur, they'll be advertised there. So definitely please visit that site and check it out. We also have a survey that is, I guess, 2 surveys, one for organization leaders and another for residents of the city, so anyone living or working in LA. We ask that if there's any way you could help share this survey, particularly the residents one, with clients that you work with, neighbors, colleagues, people that may follow you on social media. If you would help us get the word out about that, we would really appreciate it. It's available in 7 languages, kind of from the link that's on our Fair Housing website. We also have it in hard copy, so if there's any opportunity that you may have to share hard copies with folks, please send an email to that lahd.afhpolicy@lacity.org email address. We would be more than happy to send you some printed copies if you're able to share with them. And I don't, if anyone has any ideas now about ways they might be able to get the survey out, we're happy to talk about those. We really want to get it in as many hands as possible. So definitely, if there's opportunities that you may be able to help us with that, we would appreciate it. Yeah, Damon?
We can actually share the link on our neighborhood council website and different social media platforms that we have, and as well as my personal platforms as well. So I can definitely make sure that we get it out there as much, because we do have a link on our website where we do put surveys that we're trying to get the community to do. So we do get quite a few surveys done from our website.
Yeah, that'd be great. We'd really appreciate it. And Joel, I see you have your hand up too.
Yeah, just wanted to confirm. I'm not sure if I didn't catch it or you mentioned it, that the surveys also could be available in hard copy form, right? If it becomes makes it easier for certain residents to fill it out hard copy. So just wanted to also share with everyone else in the room that if there's also of interest to have those hard copy, that to please reach out to us and we can coordinate how to provide those to you.
Yeah, thanks, Joel. We are, definitely happy to get you that survey in whatever form would work best for you and the folks you know or work with. Let's see. Nancy was.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, yes, in terms of, you have the slide up, in terms of requesting the hard copies, can also email us to let us know how many you need and how we can get those hard copy surveys to you. And you can email us at the lahd.afhpolicy@lac.org email address.
Yeah, and we have your email from joining this meeting. I saw, Damon, you may have shared yours in the chat as well. So you should all be kind of on our mailing list for this project, but if you would like to join the email list, you can use that lahd.afhpolicy@lacity.org site to request to join as well, or share your email in the chat. And I'll turn it over to Nancy then.
Yeah, so we are encouraging everyone to stay involved in the city's assessment of fair housing development process. Your input is very much needed, and we consider it to be valuable. So we hope you continue to stay tuned in, because we're going to have more events taking place as we move forward. And also just as it's been stated by Melissa, what's been provided in the chat, we do have a assessment of fair housing webpage as well. And that webpage is one where we'll have various updates posted there. Dates of particular key things taking place. For example, when we have our assessment of fair housing draft available for public comment, it will be noticed there, as well as we'll also send out notices to those who are on our email list. But as we're going through this process, please check our webpage regularly for updates. And then also, as stated, we are asking for you to share the survey, but also complete the stakeholder survey as well. Your feedback that you provide in that survey is helpful for us, and it is helpful in terms of how we're using that information for the development of our plan, and various goals and strategies that are going to be developed later on and help with those additional discussions down the line. So we are encouraging completion of that survey by you all if you haven't done so already. And as mentioned by Melissa, since you've registered for this meeting, you're already part of our email list, so you'll receive updates about our work. And if you have any additional ideas to share after today, we invite you to email us at our AFH policy email address. Please send us any thoughts that you may have or any particular requests. And also we're asking that you help in spreading the word. I know Damon and others are willing and able to do so. So we hope more of you are able to spread the word to others about our work, and anyone who's interested in receiving updates about the AFH, they can request to be added to our email contact list by also emailing us at the AFH policy webpage, email address that we have available. So please have people who want to be in contact who are not already in contact, let us know, and we'll make sure to add them to our list. And we thank you all for taking time to participate in today's assessment of fair housing discussion, and we hope you stay connected going forward. So thank you all and enjoy the rest of your day.